students. Welcome to yet another exciting lecture on some very important topic of history and that is Renaissance. मैंने आपको बच्चे इससे पहले भी हमने रेनेसा के ऊपर जो है I've already made my one detailed lecture on the causes of the Renaissance. Again, just to revise Renaissance with you, I have my lecture on the quick revision on the causes of Renaissance. मैंने आपको बच्चे पहले भी बताया कि रिनेसा जो है बड़ा डिटेल टॉपिक है सो ऑब्वियसली एक रिनेसा का पार्ट जो है दैट इज़ द कॉजेज व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय द टर्म रिनेसा द फीचर्स ऑफ रिनेसा के causes क्या रहे हैं that we have already discussed, but in this particular video let's talk about the spread and the development of Renaissance. So without wasting any time, let's start. देखो जब भी बच्चों हमने स्प्रेड की बात करनी है तो हम लोग स्प्रेड जो है उसको 4 मेजर डिविजन्स में डिवाइड करते हैं. नंबर 1, वी विल स्टडी द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ रेनेसां थ्रू लिटरेचर. Number 2, through art. Number 3, through science. And number 4 is through the geographical discoveries. So let's begin with the literature first. Now, literature में बच्चे obviously we'll be talking about the Italian literature, French, English, Spanish, German, right? Because any literature के थ्रू जो है the Renaissance developed or it spread. So let's begin with that. Now, before we actually talk about the entire literature of various countries, there were certain common features, during the time when the Renaissance spread in terms of literature. देखो सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट है बच्चे डेवलपमेंट ऑफ द नेटिव लैंग्वेजेस. सो रेनेसां का एक important feature in terms of its development also, in terms of its impact also, वो ये रहा है कि development of the native or vernacular languages like Italian, French, Spanish, German, English and Dutch. नंबर 2 बच्चे जितना भी आपका रेनेसां का लिटरेचर है उसकी अगर हम थीम की बात करें उसका सेंट्रल आइडिया की बात करें जैसे मिडल एजेस में रिलीजियस थीम्स वर मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट बट ड्यूरिंग द टाइम ऑफ द रेनेसां द लिटरेचर इट डेल्ट विद द ह्यूमन लाइफ द ह्यूमन एक्टिविटीज़. So the literature reflected the critical, humanistic and individual spirit. Number 3 is the new styles of literature. That is like prose, drama, poetry, all this. So these were the 3 essential features when we talk about the development of Renaissance in literature. If I repeat again, development of the native languages, theme जो है अब आपका वो religious नहीं है, that deals with the human life and human activities, and new styles of literature like prose, drama and poetry. राइट देखो जब भी बच्चे हम लोग लिटरेचर को या रेनेसां की डेवलपमेंट को पढ़ते हैं इन टर्म्स ऑफ द लिटरेचर सो सबसे पहले हम इटालियन लिटरेचर की बात करते हैं जिसमें हमारे मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट जो लिटरेरी फिगर्स जो हैं दैट इज़ दांते, पेट्रार्क, गोबानी, बॉकासियो and your Niccoli Machiavelli, right? Then when we talk about the French literature, we have Montaigne, Francos, Rebellious, John Calvin. When we talk about the English literature, we have whole lot of literary figures like Geoffrey Chaucer, John Milton, William Shakespeare, Francis Bacon, Edmund Spenser, Thomas More, Christopher. So we have all these people who were absolutely important in terms of the spread of Renaissance in literature. When we talk about the Spanish language as such, the literary figures are Cervantes, Lope de Vega and your Calderon. होलन की बात करें तो इरास्मस, राइट. जर्मन की बात करें तो मार्टिन लूथर. सो इन लोगों को हमने जो है डिटेल में पढ़ना है जब हमने रेनेसां की डेवलपमेंट जो है लिटरेचर में देखनी है. Right, so सबसे पहले बच्चे let's start with the Italian literature. Now the people that we are going to study under this is again Dante, then is Petrarch, Giovanni Boccaccio and Niccoli Machiavelli. I'm sorry अगर मेरी pronunciation थोड़ी सी भी गलत है, do correct me if you think that this pronunciation is not correct. राइट सो सबसे पहले बच्चे द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट लिटरेरी फिगर जो हम रेनेसां की बात करते हैं दैट वाज दांते राइट ही वाज एन इटालियन पोइट अ राइटर अ फिलोसोफर एंड ही वाज born in Florence, the Republic of Florence. Now it's known as Italy. And Dante की जो बच्चे most famous book है that is Divine Comedy, right? Now this Divine Comedy has been divided into three major sections: Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradise. And basically, बच्चे this Divine Comedy it just traces the journey of Dante from darkness to the divine light. So basically, this also holds true when it comes to just so basically, if I just explain these terms like these one in a very simpler manner, so basically, bache, it's a poem which represents the soul's journey towards the God, which begins with this first state, that is your inferno. जहाँ पर जो है it starts with the recognition and the rejection of the sin, that is the stage of inferno. Then is purgatory, that is followed by as you can say in our Hindi way, the karam or doing the good things, right? And paradise is finally followed by the soul's accent to God. So it's basically, he just traces the journey from darkness to the divine light. Right. The next is Petrarch, also known as the father of humanism. Now he was also born in Florence, now known as Italy. And the most important thing that he did was, Bajay, he carried on the relentless task of searching long lost manuscripts. In fact, he wrote his famous Latin love sonnets, lyrics, and the most important one is the sonnets to Laura. Now, Petrarch is all the more important when it comes to Renaissance because he was the first man to talk about humanism in detail. And मैंने आपको पहले भी कहा, he's also known as the father of humanism. Humanism is basically a concept which tries to make man equally powerful, right? Because बच्चे medieval ages में God was everything, religion was everything. In this Renaissance time period, humanism or the humans become more important, where आप literature की themes भी it is based on their emotions, their sentiments, right? So Petrarch, the Italian scholar, he was also known as the father of humanism. So in fact, he was the first modern man to start the first humanist revolt. And his father also was very had this revolutionary ideology, so Petrarch had to spend most of his time outside Italy or Florence. Then is Govani. He was the famous storyteller of Italy, and he was the disciple of Petrarch. And Govani also wrote a collection of love stories called as the Decameron. So ये Decameron जो है, they are the collection of love stories. And इसमें बच्चे खास बात उसने क्या की कि Italian society में whatever moral evils were existent there, he tried to expose those moral evils, right? Then you have Niccoli Machiavelli. Of course, he was a great political writer of Italy. और सबसे important बात है बच्चे कि इन्होंने Latin और Greek literature को thoroughly study kiya, and he had his own political ideas. In fact, he wrote the book The Prince, the book which kind of guided the rulers, and under his influence many political rulers they formed their own nation state. An interesting thing that he says that a ruler can use any kind of means, fair or unfair, that can be used by a ruler to fulfill the goal of maintaining the political stability of the state or to keep himself in power. So, he can just use any kind of just or unjust ways, but if he has to be in power, that's absolutely fine. So, he's written this book, The Prince, which actually was his own political ideas, and the book guided the rulers, right? So we have finished with the Italian scholars. Let's move on to the French literature. We have Montaigne, Francos, Rebellius, John Calvin. Let's just read about them. See, when we talk about these ones, one is your Montaigne. Now, his essays touched every subject in a very direct and a simple style. Now, he's talked about friendship, education, and war. Now, why, how do we connect them to Renaissance? Because Renaissance is the time period जहाँ जो मैन की थॉट है, मैन के जो एक्शंस है, जो कि धर्म के इर्द गिर्द ही घूमते थे. नाउ they were trying to free themselves from the religious theme, and they were humanistic approach towards the literature. So यहाँ पर Montaigne जो है, he's written about friendship, education, war, and he says that I depict my portrait through the writings. Me and my books talk together and take some steps. Then is your Francois Reboises. He's known for his satirical writings, and his most important work is Gargantua and Pantagruel. These books are the satires on the clergy and the educational methods of this time. Then is your जॉन कैल्विन. देखो जॉन कैल्विन को हम लोग, जो मेरा लेक्चर रिफॉर्मेशन के ऊपर भी होगा, विल स्टडी हिम इन डिटेल. सो ही बिकेम फेमस नॉट ओनली एज अ रिलीजियस रिफॉर्मर but also for his polemical writings. Now you might ask me, what is this polemical writing? See, this kind of writing means when you try to attack, it's like an attack on defense of a particular opinion or belief. So you try to kind of make that particular opinion or belief highlight. That is your polemical writing. Right now, when it comes to English literature, we have the plethora of these scholars, as we talked about: Geoffrey Chaucer, Sir Thomas More, Francis Bacon, Edmund Spenser, Christopher, John Milton, William Shakespeare. तो इनकी कुछ किताबें जो है मैंने लिखी है. जैसे जियोफर चौसर जो है, ही रोट द बुक कैंटरबरी टेल्स. सर थॉमस मोर, ही रोट यूटोपिया. फ्रांसिस बैरन wrote these essays. Edmund Spicer, Fairy Queen. Christopher Marlowe, Dr. Fawcett. Ben Jonson with his drama Walpole, and William Shakespeare, one of the most important, writers of Renaissance. So his plays depict both the tragedies and comedies, and that actually reveals his mastery over English language and his deep understanding of human nature and human mind. एक इंटरेस्टिंग बात बच्चे यहाँ पर ये भी हुई थी, रेनेसां के टाइम पर जो है, there was this theater, the advent of English theater. That was something new which happened, and it became a very important part of the public entertainment in those days. When it comes to John Milton, he's written about the book Lost and Paradise Regained. See, whatever books that I'm talking about, like if I talk about Sir Thomas More Utopia, so he tries to bring about an ideal state. This is what he was talking about in his writings. And even in these writings, that you could just see that they were trying to kind of spread the ideas of the Renaissance, right? So that is how they kind of helped in terms of the spread and development of the Renaissance. Then we have the language in Spanish. We have the writers like Cervantes, Lope de Vega, and Calderon. And they have written these beautiful books. Like Cervantes, he wrote Don Quixote, and in this he's talked about the Middle Ages, and उन्होंने उस time के custom, notion and manners को जो है, he's kind of ridiculed them, and humor and sadness are well brought out in the novel. Then Lope de Vega, he also became famous as a true founder of the Spanish drama. See, what was happening in the literature was that they were trying to project the realistic society. They were trying to project man as the man he is or she is, or as a human is in terms of their feelings. So this literature was not just based on the religion. This literature was based on humanism, where the emotions of humans, or what a man needs and what is the power of the man, that was also being discussed, right? And when we talk about Holland, we have the most important writer, that is your Erasmus. And he's also written his book in praise of folly. Now, Erasmus was trained as a faithful priest, but when he was a priest himself, he lost no time in criticizing the church for its malpractices and corruption is in his famous pamphlet in praise of folly. Actually, he wanted to bring about reforms in the church. And the most important thing he did was that he brought about the Latin translation of the Greek New Testament. Right now in Germany, of course, Martin Luther is the most important writer when it comes to Renaissance. But Martin Luther, जो है बच्चे, obviously that kind of signifies two things. One, that how Renaissance was now spreading from Italy, where it started first, to North Europe. Number two, that humanist movement had its impact on the German scholars, and one of them that we are talking is Martin Luther, who led the Reformation movement, and he also translated the Holy Bible into German. So this is what we have in literature. So very quickly, we'll just go back. Right, so we started with the Italian literature. We started with Dante, his Divine Comedy, Patriarch, the father of humanism, right? Giovanni, his book, The Decameron, where there's a collection of love stories, and he's tried to expose the moral evils of the Italian society. Niccoli Machiavelli with his book Prince, right? And then in the French literature, we have Montaigne, then we have Francois Rebellious, we have John Calvin. In English literature, we have these whole lot of literary people like Geoffrey Chaucer, Sir Thomas More, William Shakespeare, John Milton, right? And in Spanish language, we have Cervantes, Lobde, Vega, and in Holland we have Erasmus. In Germany we have the Martin Luther. So हमने Renaissance का एक aspect जो है उसका spread or development in literature we have already finished. Now let's move on to the art. देखो, जब भी बच्चे हम लोग आर्ट की बात करेंगे, सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट बात है, विल बी टॉकिंग अगेन इन फोर टर्म्स. विल बी टॉकिंग इन टर्म्स ऑफ द पेंटिंग, in terms of your sculpture, in terms of architecture, and also in terms of the music. So let's just talk about the painters. देखो यहाँ पर again there is a lot of detail when it comes to the spread of Renaissance in terms of the painting. We have the Italian painters, the Venetian school, then we have the Spanish painters, Flemish school, and we also have the German painters. Right. So let's just start with the painting during the Renaissance. Now देखो, जब भी बच्चे Renaissance की बात हम लिटरेचर की बात में करते हैं, तो हम कहते हैं कि development of native languages, the themes were different, there were new styles of literature. जब बच्चे हम painting की बात करते हैं, तो most important is that the theme of painting was no longer religious. It was now again the depiction of the human emotions, or the depiction of beautiful natural scenery, right? And most important, that the painters during the Renaissance started using the oil paints, right? So now let's just go about them one by one. Let's talk about Italy first, right? Because हम लोग हमेशा कहते हैं कि Renaissance सबसे पहले इटली में आया. तो यहाँ पर again, thanks to the Medici family. Now, why do we kind of say them in terms of Renaissance? Because they were the ones, bache, they were very rich family of the Italy, being as the merchants or traders. So whatever money they were earning, they were also trying to patronize some of these painters. And the most important painters in terms of your this period is Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael. right? So first is your Leonardo da Vinci. Let's have this, pen like in like this. ठीक है जी, चलो. Now, Leonardo da Vinci, a versatile genius whose works in painting, sculpture, mathematics, botany, geology earned him the niche in the temple of genius. देखो लियोनार्डो डा विंसी की बच्चे दो पेंटिंग्स जो है बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. वन इज द मोनालिसा विच यू कैन सी हियर एंड द अदर इज द लास्ट सपर. नाउ दीज आर द टू मोस्ट famous paintings of Leonardo da Vinci, and he added new technique and he experimented with the oil paints, right? So after Leonardo da Vinci with this book, with his painting Mona Lisa and Last Supper, let's just come to Michelangelo. He was also one of the Italian painters. देखो इनके लिए जो है दो चीज़ें बहुत important है. As you can just see here, now he decorated the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City, right? And whole this designing that you can just see on the left side of these picture, the way he decorated the ceiling, it took about 4 years to complete. Now यहाँ पर बच्चे थोड़ा सा हमारा different क्या है कि themes जो हैं they still remained biblical in nature. And the other, the painting that he made was the Last Judgment, and you'll see a lot of nude pictures here, and maybe that was they wanted to portray the free nature of man. And so you'll see a lot of nude pictures during Renaissance. So that was the free the nature of man, or where they even started talking about erotic thing or the other side of human, which was thought to be absolutely normal. So just like your Leonardo da Vinci, we have Mona Lisa and Last Supper. Michelangelo, we have the most important work that he did was that he decorated the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican City, and his painting, The Last Judgment, right? सी माइकल एंजलो का हम आगे भी इनके स्कल्पचर में भी करेंगे, बिकॉज इनका ज़्यादातर काम जो है वो स्कल्पचर में भी है, दैट इज़ स्टैचूज़ बनाने में भी है. और इनके मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट स्टैचूज़ जो हम बात करेंगे दैट इज़ द ग्रैंड स्टैचू ऑफ मोजेस एंड ऑफ डेविड. नाउ सी व्हाट this is the statue of your Moises, and that's the statue of David. Now, what is so special about these, statues? I'll talk about them in the sculpture as well. But the most important thing was that how out of a huge block of marble, he was able to carve out this sculpture. And इनसे पहले जो है तकरीबन 4 बार जो है the painters, the sculptors tried to make the sculpture, and Michelangelo, even at the age of about 67, and some books they are written as 70, he actually experimented with this. Now, what is special about his sculpture is the grandeur of design, the tragic driving force, and deep religious emotion makes him unique. When he kind of made the statue of Moses, that is how the gods were portrayed, and that is how he tried to sculpt them in a sculpture. ठीक है जी. देन वी हैव रफायल सैंजियो, एंड इनका मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट जो बच्चे पेंटिंग है दैट इज़ सेस्टाइन मेडोना. एंड व्हाट इज़ द स्पेशल अबाउट इट? इट इज़ admired for its beauty and calmness, and you could also see some kind of 3D effects in that. Now, as an architect, he helped in designing the world's largest church, St. Peter's Church, but his premature death cut short his career. So, we have already finished with the Italian painters, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, as a sculptor as well, and Raphael. Sanzio, his important painting Sistine Madonna, admired for the beauty and calmness, and he also helped in designing the St. Peter's Church. let's talk about the Venetian school. And Venetian, the Venice or Italy, they produce their own school of architects. You have the Hercantis. Now they generally produce the landscapes and portrait. And then what there was Titanian, most celebrated painter. कहते हैं कि he lived up to 99 years and he produced about 700 paintings, which included portraits of many popes, merchant, nobles, and ladies. And he became famous as a realistic portrait painter. Right. Then we have in Spain, we have El Greco. Right. Then we have Velasquez, and then we have Murillo. I think the pronunciation might not be correct because obviously I don't know how to speak Spanish, but I think it'll give you some general idea. So Al Greco जो है बच्चे, he was famous for his swirling, angular, and his composition with the use of light. Then his Velázquez was very popular for his realistic portraits and how he handled the colors. Then his Murillo, he founded the Seville Academy, where 8 out of 11 paintings they are regarded as the masterpiece. देखो, whenever you're doing these doing Renaissance as a topic for your undergraduation classes, like for your BA and for your university exams, you can always omit many of the things. आप इसको समझ लो and आप इसको लिख सकते हो. But especially if you're preparing for the competitive examinations, then I think you need to divulge into the greater details, the books they had written, the special techniques that they had. So otherwise, things can be much easier if you're just preparing for the university exams. But again बच्चे, I'll tell you कि अगर इतनी details लिखोगे तो फिर number भी अच्छे आएंगे. ठीक है जी. Then there is a Dutch painter, Rembrandt. He is known for his famous painting The Night Watch. This is that painting. Right. नाउ ये जो पेंटिंग है ये किसके लिए इतनी फेमस थी? बेसिकली बच्चे, तीन थिंग्स के लिए. एक तो इसका कलोसल साइज, मतलब ह्यूज साइज जो है. Then the dramatic use of light and shadow, and then the perception of motion in what would have traditionally been static military group portrait. And it actually seems as if the music is being played. So this perception bhi bache, one of the important features of the development of Renaissance tha, jab in terms of your paintings, right? In Holland, we have Rembrandt for his Night Watch. We have Jan Vermeer. We have Frans Hales. So all these were the important painters of the Renaissance period. Then we have the Flemish school. See, even before Italy witnessed Renaissance, there was a Flemish school, and they had painters like I told you, Jan, Hubert. Now they were actually this kind of paintings, as you can just see. These were the paintings which are actually associated with the Flemish school, right? Then in Germany, again, we have Matthias, we have Dürer, we have Lucas, and most important of these ones is the just hold on, let me have this. Okay, the most important one is the Hans Holbein. He was famous for his engravings and portrait. And it is said that Hans was also a very close friend of Erasmus, so he had also painted the portrait of Erasmus. So I think this is what we have in our painting. So very quickly, we'll just go back, and I'm sure the things are much more clearer to you. Italian painters, we have Leonardo da Vinci, Mona Lisa, The Last Supper, Michelangelo, then we have Raphael Sanzio, then we have the Venetian school, we have the Spanish school, we have the Holland school of painting. Then we have the Flemish school. In German, the most important was the Hans Holbein, and known for his wood engravings and portraits. See, basically बच्चे, कई दफ़ा में होता है कि Renaissance in terms of painting को कैसे हम देखते हैं. Basically, it was the freedom, right? आप ये देखो, Middle Ages में themes are so much religious. They were not allowed to use certain type of colors. Oil painting was restricted. So you could see that that kind of freedom during this Renaissance time period. And this all we count as the spread or the development of Renaissance. Now let's talk about the sculptures. Lorenzo Gilberati became famous after the production of the magnificent doors at the baptistry at Florence. देखो यहाँ मैंने pictures खास तौर पे add किया है बच्चे, because I'll be very honest with you, Renaissance cannot be understood without the pictures. So I think this is that production of that magnificent door for which Lorenzo Gilberti is quite famous, right? Then you also have Donatello statue of Saint George in Florence. So Donatello was another important sculptor, and his statue of Saint George in Florence is very very important. Then you also have Luca della Robbia. सो इनका बच्चे खास बात क्या है, अगर आप ये सारे इनके उप्स इनके सारे जो हैं, अगर आप ये जो स्कल्पचर्स देखो, व्हाट वर दे इम्पॉर्टेंट फॉर, देखो दे वर इम्पॉर्टेंट बिकॉज इसमें एक यूनिक बात क्या है, एक शाइनी चीज़ आपको नज़र आ रही है. सो ही प्रोड्यूस ग्लेज्ड और शाइनी terracotta figurines, right? So this is an important feature here. Then you have the Medici family. हमने पहले बात भी किया था. And Lorenzo di Medici, he had his beautiful garden adorned with the finest sculptural works. So these are the two pictures which actually show that how the Lorenzo di Medici, उनका garden जो है, that was adorned with finest sculptural works, right? So all this shows the power of the human imagination, the power the human holds in his hand or in his artistic touch. So this is what Renaissance stood for, the freedom. राइट देखो माइकल एंजलो का हमने उनके जब पेंटिंग्स की बात की थी, तो ख़ास तौर पे द स्टैचू ऑफ डेविड एंड मोइसेस इज़ एब्सोल्युटली इम्पोर्टेंट, and how he kind of sculpted from colossal block of marble is actually praiseworthy. And look at the intricate details that has been made on these statues. So we finish with the statues, with the sculpture. Now let's talk about the architecture. तो Renaissance के टाइम पे architecture कैसा था? Basically बच्चे, as I told you in the very beginning, that Renaissance stood for the rediscovery of the classical Greek and Roman civilizations. So architecture में बच्चे, they try to follow the Greek and Roman architecture. And वो कैसा था? Round arches, tall columns, big domes, that were the principal feature of the architecture during the Renaissance. Now, St. Peter's Church in Rome, which was designed by Michelangelo, rose to the height of more than 400 feet. It could, hold up to about 80,000 people. He also set up the St. Mark's in Venice and the St. Paul's Church in London. So these are the examples of the architecture during that period, right? So if I could just out of this one is the St. Mark's in Venice, and the other one is the St. Paul's Church in London, right? One of the largest churches in the world. And again, the most important thing which यहाँ पर था, round arches, then the tall columns, big domes. This is the dome-like structure which you can see, right? So all this was the classical the development or spread of Renaissance through architecture, right? Now, in a very short way, let's just talk about what was different during Renaissance. देखो Renaissance में emphasis was more on design and orientation, right? Then Renaissance found expression in the public buildings and palaces. So Renaissance, the emphasis was on design orientation, and of course it found its expression in public building in terms of your churches and also in terms of the palaces, right? The next important one. So what have we covered? We have covered literature, we have covered the art. Art में बच्चे हमने paintings भी कर लिया, sculpture भी कर लिया, architecture भी कर लिया. अब हम आ गए हैं music के ऊपर. देखो music in the Middle Ages or before the Renaissance, most important was the religious themes, right? Because the music in the church was only to serve the religious purpose. लेकिन बच्चे Renaissance के टाइम पे music was gradually transformed to serve humanity under the influence of humanism. So besides vocal, even instrumental music became more important. We have the introduction of new instruments like violin, lute, harpsichord, and the most important, orchestral music became very important. So vocal to tha ye bache, instrumental became more important. कौन से instruments, violin, lute, harpsichord, all these instruments were introduced, and orchestra music became quite important. Right, so now we are moving to the third part in terms of development or spread of Renaissance. We'll be talking about the scientific discoveries or the science. Now, in during 13th century, बच्चे जब हम Renaissance की बात करते हैं, so there was a controversy between the faith and the reason. Now, faith की बात हम करते हैं, that is Sir Saint Thomas Aquinas. Now, he defended church by his work Summa Theologica. Another scientist was Roger Bacon. Now he insisted on scientific temper and empirical, that is, everything based on the experiments, on logic, on reasoning. So in 13th century, there was a controversy between the faith, which defended church, and most important was Sir Saint Thomas Aquinas in his work Summa Theology, and the other one based on the reason was put up by Roger Bacon because he insisted scientific temper and empirical observation. Now let's talk about sciences. Now when we talk about the sciences, bache, Francis Bacon, his name shines like a star because he was a great scientist. And he said that koi bhi truth jo hai that cannot be found without an experiment. So he is regarded, not also, he is regarded as the father of the modern science. And while experimenting on the method of preserving food, he breathed his last. So, Francis Bacon, the father of the modern science, and he talked about the experiment as the way to reach to the truth. Now let's talk about the astronomy. देखो एस्ट्रोनॉमी बच्चे बहुत सारे नाम हम लोग करके आएंगे बिकॉज अब यहाँ पर एस्ट्रोनॉमी क्यों इम्पोर्टेंट हो जाती है क्योंकि कुछ concepts जो हैं that was already put up by church during the medieval ages, and one of them was that it is the earth जो कि आपके यूनिवर्स के सेंटर में है और सन और बाकी प्लैनेट्स जो हैं उसके अराउंड मूव करती हैं. अब यहाँ पर मुझे आप देखोगे एस्ट्रोनॉमी में लॉट मेनी न्यू डिस्कवरीज वर बीइंग डन, right? So lot many new things were coming up. Now in this realm of scientific discoveries, Copernicus of Poland is very very important. Now the name of his book was On the Revolution of the Celestial Bodies. So उन्होंने बच्चे पहली बार ये कहा कि sun is static और अर्थ बाकी प्लैनेट्स की तरह उसके अराउंड रिवॉल्व करते हैं. नाउ एज आई टोल्ड यू बिफोर दैट हिज व्यू वाज एब्सोल्युटली कॉन्ट्ररी टू द medieval belief that earth was the center of universe, and इसके लिए he was quite criticized, but he remained firm in his faith. So first one to talk about that sun is in the center and earth बाकी प्लैनेट्स की तरह उसके इर्द गिर्द घूमती है, that was Copernicus, right? And then what happened next? So iske baad bache, another important name that we can think about in terms of your astronomy, in terms of Renaissance, is John Kepler. Now the only difference is बच्चे देखो कॉपरनिकस ने भी यही कहा कि अर्थ जो है सन सेंटर में है, अर्थ उसके अराउंड रिवॉल्व करती है. जॉन केपलर ने बच्चे कुछ मैथमेटिकल जो है इक्वेशंस के साथ ही ट्राई टू एस्टैब्लिश दैट ठीक है अर्थ जो है इट मूव्स अराउंड द सन, बट he talked about one thing, that they move around an elliptical path rather than a circular path. Eclipse matlab they have their own paths where these planets they follow their path. So this is what he said, that earth like other planets revolve around the sun in an elliptical rather than circular path. Now this created a storm in the field of thinking. Now this is very important because Pope, in the medieval times, he was trying to portray that no, Earth is in the center, sun revolves around it. Now, अब आप देखो ये सारी चीज़ें जो है कॉपरनिकस की बात करते हैं, जॉन केपलर की बात करते हैं, ये एब्सोल्युटली डिफरेंट व्यू पॉइंट जो है वो लेकर आ रहे हैं. Right. Another one was your Galileo of Italy. He actually joined as a lecturer of mathematics in the University of Pisa. He became a professor. Now, उन्होंने भी इसी चीज़ को prove किया, but he proved through his invented telescope, right? So he tried to prove that whatever theory of Copernicus is, that sun is in the center and earth like other planets revolve, is absolutely true. Number two, bache, he also proved that Milky Way galaxy, as we know, consists of stars. Then he also gave his pendulum theory, and that helped on inventing clock later on. एंड इसके ये सारे व्यूज़ के वजह से पोप ने जो है उन्हें आउटकास्ट डिक्लेयर कर दिया था. एंड गलीलियो वॉज कंपेल्ड टू विड्रॉ हिज व्यू आउट ऑफ फियर, बट लेटर ऑन हिज व्यूज़ वर एक्सेप्टेड एज ट्रू एंड ही बिकेम वर्ल्ड फेमस. There is another important thing, that it is from the Leaning Tower of Pisa that he also tried to prove that heavy and light objects fall to ground at the same speed. So that is Galileo with his telescope, and then Milky Way, the pendulum theory, right? All right, another one is Sir Isaac Newton of England. Now, he, in his famous book, this is very important, this normally comes in your GK book, because हम लोग Isaac Newton की law of gravitation के बारे में जानते हैं, but ये कौन सी book में है, we normally forget. Now, this has been written in his famous book, Principia, and where he talks about the three laws of gravitation, then his theory of motion, then he also talks about the causes of the tide. In fact, these causes of the tide were also discovered by Isaac Newton. Now, इसमें बच्चे रेनेसां की बात जब हम करते हैं, so जो एक medieval ages में, all these things were controlled by religion. But now, as you can say, with these scientific discoveries, new phenomena were coming, and with the new phenomena, even the whole perception about the world or the universe or Earth, the composition of Earth or the shape of the Earth, that all was being questioned. एंड बच्चे जब भी हम रेनेसां की बात करते हैं, उसका सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट इम्पैक्ट या इफेक्ट जो है, दैट वाज रिफॉर्मेशन, व्हेन देयर वाज रिफॉर्म इन द कैथोलिक चर्च, और वी टॉक अबाउट द प्रोटेस्टेंट कैथोलिक चर्च, राइट? Then is, see, that was astronomy. Now let's talk about chemistry. So progress was also made in the field of chemistry. It was Cordus. He made ether from the sulfuric acid and alcohol, which was another important achievement of science. Then it was again Helmont. He discovered carbon dioxide, और उन्होंने ये भी एक्सप्लेन किया कि there are various type of gases in the atmospheric air. And later on, carbon dioxide was used to extinguish fire and to prepare cakes and cold drinks. So carbon dioxide was discovered during the time of Renaissance by Helmont. Right, now let's come to the medical sciences. Now, in case of the human anatomy, the science of revolutionary brought about science of Renaissance brought about some revolutionary changes. Like we have Vesalius, a medical scientist. He talked about the various parts of human body like skeleton, cartilage, muscles, vein, arteries, digestive and reproductive systems, lungs, and brain. Then William Harvey of England, I think we've talked about him. We must have read in our high school science books that when he talked about the process of the blood circulation, and इन्होंने कहा कि कैसे blood जो है वो circulate करता है from heart to the arteries and then to veins and then back to heart, and his contribution, especially in terms of the process of blood circulation, was undoubtedly a boom to the modern medical sciences. Right? So the last thing that we are going to talk about is the geographical discoveries. See, when we talk about Renaissance in terms of geographical discoveries, इसमें बच्चे सबसे important बात है कि the Marinus compass had been discovered. So with the discovery of the Marinus compass, it became very easy to travel through the ships. These explorers now made efforts to find out new sea routes, and इन्होंने in that discovery found many such parts of earth which were absolutely unknown. Now let's talk about the Portuguese first. Now Portugal was the first in sphere of your geographical discoveries. In 1487, Bartolomeo Dias, he was the first person to reach the Indian Ocean. In fact, he reached the southern coast of Africa. Then, when we talk about Vasco da Gama, of course, he discovered the sea route to India, and he reached the western coast situated at Calcutta. Then we have Christopher Columbus, who discovered America. Then we have Magellanian, who tried to kind of, uh, reject this thing, reject the size or in terms of the shape of the earth, that it is absolutely flat. He tried to prove that the earth is oval in shape. So it is because of these geographical discoveries that the new areas came into being. And of course, it is because of these discoveries that the trade of various countries of Europe became well developed, and they got many economic gains. See, iska ek aur bhi hai कि again it was because of Renaissance that these search for the colonies started, because now from imperialism we are moving towards mercantilism. यानी कि अगर आपको बचे, imperialism मतलब you kind of annexing territories and making them a part of your empire, and उसका same version जो है, that is how you do through the trade. And mercantilism जो है, that was also one of the impact of the Renaissance, where it was thought that your exports should be more than your imports. So iska again there'll be a detailed video on that. So we have almost come to the end of the spread and development of Renaissance, right? I will just take you back to the first slide where we started from. That let's see if we have covered them all, right? So let's just come to the very first slide. Right now, this is where I wanted to come. So, we have done the spread of Renaissance in terms of the literature, in terms of art, in terms of science, astronomy, physics, chemistry, medicine, and other inventions. देखो इसमें बच्चे आपका gunpowder is most important, and another is the printing press. And I think हमने printing press को causes में भी किया था, but of course it also aided in the spread and the development of Renaissance, right? Then we also talked about the geographical discoveries. So this, I think, kind of sums your video lecture on the topic spread and development of Renaissance. I think it is now clear to you. I do agree, Bache, there's a lot of things to be learnt here. But I would just kind of advise you that, just go through this video and try to just understand what Renaissance spread development is. And then go back to your textbooks. You can just read your chapter again, and I'm sure it'll become easy for you to learn that. अनदर बच्चे इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग जो है, देखो जब भी ऐसे हिस्ट्री में ऐसे टॉपिक्स आते हैं जिसमें बहुत कुछ इन्फॉर्मेशन एंड दैट यू नीड टू लर्न देम, प्लीज़ मेक दैट इंफॉर्मेशन इन अ टैबुलर फॉर्म. टेबल बनाओगे, टैबुलर फॉर्म में इसको याद करोगे, आई डोंट थिंक देयर विल बी एनी प्रॉब्लम इन लर्निंग. बट इफ़ यू फील दैट यू गोना लर्न इट फ्रॉम द बुक, it might be a difficult proposition. So I suggest that please make some beautiful notes of this question, right? And of course, while you're making your notes, you can also add a little bit. There are various, sites on the internet. There are various articles on spread of Renaissance in in the on the internet, so you can also go through them and make some perfect notes, which can be read or learned whenever the need arises. So with this, I think I'm going to sign off right now, and I will see you in the next video where we will be talking about the impact of the Renaissance. Thank you, and take good care of yourself. Bye.